Hello, my dear family. I hope you all are feeling great, everyone is in the Christmas mood, and you're ready for new stories. Personally, I have no idea how to celebrate this Christmas. I want to be with my daughter, but it means I need to see my ex again. But I also have a girlfriend, and I like her and want to spend the evening with her as well. I hate it so much. And then they say all men are cheaters, and all men leave their kids after a divorce. Hello, I've been cheated on, and I want to be with my daughter. I am here. But no, the world doesn't say a word about cheating women. Okay, never mind. Today we have a two-part story, and today's part is about a heartbreaking divorce. But tomorrow, I will post an incredible happy ending that will make you smile. So, let's start. My wife, Jody, thought that spending a night with another man would be fun. She also thought I wouldn't mind. She may have been correct on the night of fun part, but she certainly ducked up thinking I wouldn't object. I was sitting at my desk sipping my coffee and smiling. I was remembering the morning duck my wife Jody and I had enjoyed just a couple of hours before. Her name is Jodel, but everyone calls her Jody. Sex with her was always great. We met in high school and, for the most part, only dated each other. I say for the most part because the few times we had what we call disagreements we both dated other people, but we always made our way back to each other. We gave our first times to each other 1 month before our senior prom, and 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. Her 18th was exactly 1 month before mine, and we married 9 months after graduating. She was my only sex partner, and as far as I knew, I was her only one. My cell phone rang. I looked to see if I knew who was calling. I give my business card out and get calls from numbers I don't recognize, so I can't be selective about answering it. I hate getting calls from scam artists and have gotten calls offering to help fix my computer, improve my credit or get me better healthcare. But I especially hate when the caller says he or she is calling from the IRS, and there are problems with my tax returns, and if I don't call them immediately, they are going to send the cops after me. I am able to tolerate the legitimate calls where honest people are trying to make a living, but I hate scumbag scam artists and thieves, and as soon as I recognize them as such, I start describing to them what I would do after I stuck a broomstick up their bum. They tend to hang up rather quickly after that. Anyway, my cell phone rang. The screen showed it was Jody's office number. My first thought was why was she calling from her office phone and not her cell phone? So I answered. Hello, sweetie. This isn't your wife, Mr. Taylor. That's my name. Taylor. John Richard Taylor 3. And, as is the tradition in parts of the country, being the third person in line with the same name I was called Trey. Jody works in insurance. I sell RVs and concentrate on high-end motor coaches. Neither Jody nor I graduated from college, but we think we do okay. We live in a house owned by my mother and stepfather, and pay no rent while we save enough to buy our own. We like the house and the neighborhood and, frankly, are in no hurry to move. My name is Michael Hamilton and I work with your wife. What can I do for you, Mr. Hamilton? I hope it is more what I can do for you. I have some information about your wife that I think you should know. Are you available to meet me around noon today? What kind of information? Is she alright? She was fine the last time I saw her, and as far as the information I have, I much prefer discussing it in person. Listen, Mr. Hamilton, I don't know what kind of joke you and my wife are trying to pull, but I don't have time for it. Just tell her that I didn't fall for it, and I will see her at home. Wait, Mr. Taylor. This is no joke and she doesn't know I'm calling. Meet me and you might be able to stop her from having an affair. I will be at the Spike restaurant at noon. It is on the corner of Ryan and Alamo. I am wearing a gray suit with a blue tie. He hung up. What the duck just happened? A complete stranger has just told me that I might be able to stop my wife from having an affair if I meet him. If this was her idea of a joke, I was not amused. So now I'm in a quandary. Do I meet him and fall for the joke? What if it isn't a joke? Duck. At noon, I was standing outside the Spike. A man approached me and asked if I were John Taylor. I assured him I was and indicated that we should go inside. He suggested that we just walk for a while to avoid anyone overhearing us. So we started in the direction of the downtown park. We had just started walking and I asked what this was all about. I started working with your wife 2 months ago. We work in the same section. Almost immediately, I started hearing about her and a man in our section. It was another week or so before I started seeing things for myself. His name is Stan Morrison and they go to lunch together almost every day. They have made no secret of their friendship and talk openly. Today most of the office overheard them talking about going out tomorrow night. They've decided to go to the Hilton because it has a nice restaurant, and tomorrow night there will be live music. They plan on having dinner and then dance to the live music before going up to their room and spending the night. He even called to reserve the room. Even as we speak, your wife is out shopping for clothes for their date. Tomorrow night. and spending the night together. Just how do they expect to accomplish that? She is going to tell you the truth. She is convinced that you love her enough to allow her to experience another man, since you are the only one she has ever had. I overheard that bit of information last week. She honestly feels that it will not affect your marriage in any way. I guess that's why they feel safe talking openly. She doesn't think you will have a problem with it. Why are you telling me this? I was married for 9 years and my wife had an affair. The legal system ducked me more completely than her lover ever ducked her. She and her boyfriend are now living in the house that I pay for, and my children are calling him daddy. I'm living in a dump of an apartment and eating beans and rice 5 nights a week. I see this as a chance to possibly help someone else avoid my situation. We talked for a while longer and he left to go back to work. I was left to contemplate my marriage and my future. My conclusion was that if he was telling the truth, my marriage was over. It was frightening that I could so easily consider the possible demise of my marriage based solely on a relatively short conversation with a total stranger, but I thought back to my youth and remembered the pain my mother had gone through. My father was both an alcoholic and a philanderer. He had several affairs and was open about them. He even teased my mother about them. I asked her why she put up with it. "I love him," was her response. Once, when I was about 11 years old, he took me with him to his then current girlfriend's house. The two of them were somewhere in the house and I was in her living room with her dog. I got tired of sitting there petting the dog, so I left and walked a mile or so home. When I got home, I told my mother where I had been. We only had one car, so she and I walked back to where the car was. She made no effort to confront them, and I don't know if he even realized I had left. We took the car and went home. I didn't see him for about a week, and my mother wouldn't let him in the house. 2 days after she did finally let him back in, he whipped me with his belt for dropping a kitchen plate and breaking it, but after thinking about it, I thought the real reason was me telling on him. Given my experiences as a child and seeing the pain my mother suffered, I could see no circumstance under which I would or could condone Jody having an affair. Her even thinking about having one was too much for me. Call me a jerk, insensitive, cocky, arrogant, goody two-shoes or anything else you can think of, but I had no intention of going through what my mother did. She eventually found the strength to leave my father, and we were much better for it. That was years ago. He still lives in town, but we rarely see each other, and that's fine with me. She remarried and is very happy and, as I've already mentioned, Jody and I live in a house owned by her and my stepfather. So what do I do now? Confront Jody or ignore the information I had just received? Wait and see what happens. As a salesman, you can't always wait for someone to walk in the front door ready to buy. You have to be proactive. Give your card out. Make phone calls. Talk to people. Anticipate, be tenacious and resilient, and know your product. Well, that know your product thing might be a problem in this case. If what Michael Hamilton told me is true, I don't know Jody at all. And she, apparently, doesn't know me. I had made no secret of my feelings about adultery, and she was well aware of my family history. So I decided to be proactive. But exactly how does one start being proactive in a situation which may not even exist? Start by covering all your bases. Anticipate a worst-case scenario. Then choose a course of action and determine what is the best thing that can happen to you as a result of your decision, and what is the worst thing that can happen. If you are not prepared to accept the worst possible outcome, choose a different course of action, and keep choosing until you determine what you can accept. I made my decision and determined that my first task was to find a private investigator. There were several in the phone book. I randomly selected one, called and was told to come right over. 30 minutes later I was in his office. 2 hours after that he had lots of my dollars, and we had a plan. It was now time to go home. I had no idea how I was going to act around her tonight. She was home when I got there. When I walked in, she came up to me for our usual kiss and hug. I had given a lot of thought about how I should act. I could either act normally, in which case she would assume that everything was okay and her plans could continue, if indeed she actually had any plans. Or I could, in some way, hint to her about what I had heard. If I did, she could deny everything and postpone it until things blew over. If she was considering doing it now, what would prevent her from reconsidering or even actually doing it sometime in the future? I had no intention of living with that possibility. The other side of the coin, of course, was that if she knew I suspected her, it might cause her to abandon their plan. I decided to act normally. Dinner was almost ready. She was just waiting for me to grill the pork chops. I did, and we ate. Acting normally was more difficult than I thought it would be. For me. She, however, was either a very good actress or, as Michael Hamilton had indicated, was so sure of herself that she had no concerns at all and was free to be natural. Around 11, I went upstairs to get ready for bed. Jody was already asleep. I took my shower and went to bed, but I didn't sleep. At 6 the next morning she got up, got dressed, and went downstairs. A few minutes later, I got up, dressed and went downstairs. She was gone. I can count on one hand the number of times one of us left the house without a kiss goodbye. This was one of them. It was Friday and normally a good day for selling RVs, but I called my boss and told him I was going to take the morning off. I called the attorney the dealership used and asked if he knew of a good divorce attorney. He referred me to his wife. But let me warn you. She hates husbands who screw around on their wives, so if you did, she probably won't take your case. He called her and sent me over immediately. I told her about my conversation with Michael Hamilton. Her first question was why did I think it necessary to consult a lawyer and hire an investigator solely on the unsubstantiated story of a total stranger. I then told her about my parents and my personal intolerance for adultery or anything approaching it. She recommended that I wait and confirm his story. She also commented that if Jody was as confident as Hamilton had indicated that our marriage would not be hurt, she really had nothing to lose by having a little fling. I informed her that there was no way I would tolerate a fling, little or otherwise, and if Jody went through with her plans tonight, I wanted to be able to have her served no later than Monday. If Hamilton was either lying or mistaken, I might have to be prepared to eat a lot of crow, but if he was telling the truth, I would be ready. Although hesitant, she assured me that the paperwork would be ready, and all that would be needed was the location she was to be served if it came to that. By 1 in the afternoon I was back at my desk trying to sell an RV to a retired couple who had been married almost 50 years. At first, I had reservations about selling a 45 motor coach to such an elderly couple, but after talking to them and watching the way they interacted, my reservations disappeared. He acted younger than I did and moved with more agility. In fact, I was envious, both of his seeming youth and vigor and of their relationship. I had been working with them for a couple of weeks, and it seemed they were now ready to buy. They had picked out the one they wanted, and we had driven it up and down the highway. Their name was Jacobson, and Mr. Jacobson had driven it and seemed comfortable and in control behind the wheel. I had trouble concentrating on what I was doing, but I was enjoying their back and forth banter as they discussed the pros and cons of motorhome ownership. They were exactly what I wanted Jody and me to be after a long, happy marriage. In the end, I decided to give them a new and added incentive. I decided to call it my trade discount. I had never done it before, but I really liked them, so I threw in part of my commission as an additional discount. They bought the RV and left with smiles on their faces. It was time to go home. I checked with my investigator and was assured that everything was ready. At 5:30, I pulled into the garage. Jody's car was in its usual spot. I went inside and didn't smell anything to indicate that dinner was being cooked. I was as calm, cool and collected as I thought possible. I put the package my investigator had given me on the mantel and resisted the urge to find her, so I sat in my recliner and waited to see what would happen. I didn't have to wait long. At 5:45 she came downstairs dressed to kill in what apparently was the clothes Michael Hamilton told me she had been shopping for the day before. She was gorgeous and had her overnight case with her. Wow. You look great. What's the occasion? One of the guys at work has been after me to go out with him, and I decided that it would be fun. What do you mean go out with him? Like on a date? Yes. What kind of a date? Well, we thought that since you are the only man I have ever been with that it might be fun for me to have sex with someone else, so we are going to have dinner, go dancing and then spend the night at a hotel. I couldn't believe how calm she was, and how much my feeling of being calm, cool and collected, was replaced with a huge cold knot where my stomach should be. You can't be serious. You're spending the night with another man. There's no way in hell that I will agree to something like that. And who the hell is this who you're talking about? I wasn't asked about this. It's no big deal. Just one night of playing around. Tomorrow I'll be home and it will be like nothing ever happened. Besides, I might learn a trick or two you might enjoy. There is no way you're going out tonight and ducking someone else. Don't be silly. Of course I am. Jody, if you do this our marriage is over. Just then we heard a car horn. That's him, she said, heading to the front door. I beat her there. Please don't do this, I said, blocking her path. I have to go. She walked around me and then tried to kiss me. I will be home about noon tomorrow, and you will find nothing has changed. If you get in that car you won't have a home to come back to. Now you're really being silly. Have a good evening thinking of me enjoying myself. When I get home tomorrow, we can duck our brains out. Good night. She blew me a kiss on her way out the door. I never watched her get in the car. I walked to the mantel and turned off the recorder I had put there. I took a box of garbage bags upstairs. It took me almost 2 hours to remove all evidence that she had ever lived here. I emptied her closet and her side of the bathroom cabinet. I even took from the safe the few pieces of jewelry she had, her birth certificate, high school diploma, and her social security card. I took all of it downstairs and set it by the garage door. Then I went through the downstairs collecting her stuff, her family photo albums, her high school awards, and the bronze statue by Remington she had inherited from her grandfather. I even removed all of the little magnets she had put on the refrigerator. I crammed everything in her car. Then I backed it out of the garage and parked it on the street. I put the keys on the driver's seat. I went to bed and tried to sleep. No luck. All I did was toss and turn. I finally got up and brewed a pot of coffee. I turned on the TV and tried to watch an all-night marathon of Hogan's Heroes and drink coffee. For 2 nights running now I had no sleep. I felt like a zombie. I was at the dealership early. By 11 o'clock I had closed the deal with the Jacobsons from the day before, and they were driving off the lot in their highly discounted motor coach. I had also done all of the financial stuff I thought was required. At 11:45, I was home and received the new set of house keys from the locksmith. My investigator was also there with copies of the videos he had made over the last 18 hours. At 12:30, I was watching a video I had gotten from the investigator when I heard the front doorbell. I went to the door and opened it. "Hi, sweetie. My key doesn't work and why is my car on the street?" I stood in the doorway blocking her from coming in. "Your key doesn't work because you don't live here anymore. And your car is on the street because since you don't live here anymore, I didn't want it in my garage." "What are you talking about? This is my home. Now let me in," she said as she tried to go around me. "I told you last night that if you got in that man's car you wouldn't have a home to come back to. All of your stuff is in your car." "You can't be serious." It was just I didn't hear the rest of what she was saying because I slammed the door in her face. She pounded on the door for several minutes before I opened it. "If you don't stop beating on my door, I'll call the police and have you arrested." I probably couldn't do that, but I had nothing to lose. "You can't do that. This is my house. This house belongs to my mother and stepfather, and they determine who lives here, and they have determined that you no longer do. Now leave." Again, I probably couldn't legally do that, but I did it anyway. I slammed the door in her face for the second time and resumed watching the tape. I looked out the front window sometime later and she was sitting in her car. I went to the kitchen for a drink of water, but changed my mind and had a gin and tonic instead. I watched more of the tape. During the course of the afternoon, I had gotten madder and madder. I heard the doorbell ringing. Well, not actually ringing, it was steady and unending. If it is Jody again and in the mood I am in, I will probably rip her cunt off and feed it to the neighborhood dogs. I ran to the door and jerked it open to find her sister, Judy, standing there leaning on the doorbell. Jodel and Judy. Their parents had little imagination. Their brother's name was Jacob. I just looked at her. "You are in a hole. My sister is at my house bawling her eyes out, and I want to know why." Duck these sisters, I thought as I slammed the door in her face. Slamming doors was beginning to feel therapeutic. I turned to go back into the room and the bell started again. I jerked the door open and before she had a chance to stop ringing, I slapped her hand off the bell so hard she lost her balance and almost fell. "If you ring that bell again, I will break your ducking fingers one at a time." I started to slam the door yet again. She put her body against it and held it open. "Talk to me, please." I stood there for several seconds and slowly opened the door and indicated that she could come in. She walked into the room and stopped. Then she looked at me. "I thought you loved Jody. I can't believe you kicked her out over such a stupid disagreement." "Stupid disagreement?" "She told me that last night you didn't agree with her about going out and that you kicked her out because of it." "Oh, my God. She is right about a disagreement. She did want to go out and I didn't want her to." "Did she tell you that the person she wanted to go out with wasn't me? That it was a guy she worked with?" "You've got to be kidding." "And did she tell you that their plan was to have dinner, then go dancing, and then spend the night in a hotel room?" "You can't be serious. You're making this up." She sat down. "And did she tell you that she was going to come home today and show me what she had learned?" "Listen to this." I played her the audio recording I had made the night before. "I had no idea." "Yeah, well, neither did I." "What are you going to do?" "Divorce her." "Oh, no. Any chance at all of getting past it?" I shook my head. She tried to say something else, but I stopped her. "Look, Judy, I have no intention of either forgiving or forgetting what she did. This marriage is over. Period." She nodded in thought for a couple of minutes, then shrugged and stood. I walked her to the door. She stood there and looked at me. I opened the door and ushered her out. For the rest of that evening and all day Sunday I did nothing. I ate 2 grilled cheese sandwiches and a couple more gins and tonic. Self-pity had set in and was rapidly taking over my spirit. There was a knock on the door. It was Judy. You said that if I rang the bell again you would break my fingers. So I not. This won't take long. I have spent the day talking to Jody. What you told me is true. It wasn't easy for her to tell me about her date, but she finally confessed. What you don't know is that nothing happened. I indicated that she should come in and sit. I sat across from her. What do you mean nothing happened? She told me that after he picked her up here they went to the hotel. They ordered a bottle of champagne before ordering dinner, and had finished half of it by the time the waiter took their dinner order. By the time dinner arrived they were working on their second bottle of champagne. Halfway through dinner it was empty. After drinking all of that champagne they felt that they were both too drunk to dance, so they went upstairs to their room. They did intend to have sex, but were too drunk to accomplish it. They both passed out. She was the first to awaken and realize what she had done. She woke him up and insisted that he drive her home. Well, that's quite a story. You believe her, don't you? What I believe is that she and some man spent days, maybe weeks or months planning a date. In that planning process, they spent time together at lunch and work, maybe even after work. They talked and they schemed. During the time they spent together, they drew closer. They laughed together, worked together, exchanged confidences. He probably knows more about my marriage than I do. Hell, as a matter of fact, I know he does. He knew my wife planned to cheat on me. They probably held hands. Maybe kissed, or even fondled each other. They planned to spend the evening and night together so they could have sex. That sounds like the ultimate disrespect and betrayal, not love. She just looked at me. You don't believe her, do you? No, I don't. And you're not going to forgive her, even though nothing happened. Not in this lifetime. We got to the door and she opened it. She paused. When this is over, can we still be friends? Jody and I are going to be divorced. If she contests it in any way, it is going to be messy. By the time it is over you will probably not like me, so any friendship we have will most likely go away. I see. Well, it could have been nice. I think I'm going to miss you. With that she put one hand on my left cheek and gently kissed my right cheek. Then she left softly, closing the door behind her. Since Saturday afternoon, my phone had been off more than it was on. Jody had tried too many times to count to talk to me, but had finally given up. I did have a conversation with her father. He tried to convince me that since nothing had happened between Jody and Stan, that no foul had taken place, so we should just suck it up and get over it. I explained it to him the same way I had to Judy. When we ended the conversation, he knew that divorce was inevitable. He hung up with a sigh. Monday came. The first thing I did was call my attorney and tell her about the weekend. I also told her to serve Jody. She would be either at work or at her sister's house. I was assured she would be served before day's end. It was a long day and I don't remember anything I did. Shortly after 4 in the afternoon, my cell phone rang. I looked to see who was calling. It was Jody's office number. I took a chance and answered it. Trey Taylor. Good afternoon, Mr. Taylor. This is Michael Hamilton. I thought you might like to know that there was some excitement here a short time ago. Really? Yes, sir. Your wife was served and after she read the papers, she fainted. The EMTs were called and they took her to the hospital. When she fainted, she dropped the papers. After the EMTs left with her, Stan Morrison picked up the papers and looked at them. Then he almost fainted. If the situation hadn't been so serious, it might have been funny, but I saw no humor in the destruction of another marriage, and I had no sympathy for either of them. I will keep you up to date on events as they happen around here. You do that. My phone rang again. It was Judy. Hello. Jody has been taken to the hospital. So? Just thought you would like to know. Nope. Not the least bit interested in her or her health. Are you really that cold-hearted, Trey? Any cold-heartedness on my part is directly attributable to your sister. I told you yesterday that it was going to get messy. This is just the first round. The next couple of weeks went pretty much as you would expect. Jody tried numerous times to talk to me, but I had no interest in listening. Both her father and mother tried to get me to talk to her. I told them both no. My mother spent a lot of time trying to make me feel better. I kept telling her I was fine, but she insisted I wasn't, so she tried even harder. Michael Hamilton called almost daily. He was having fun. He was the only one there who knew that I knew about Morrison. Jody came to work, but just sat there except for the times she was out meeting with her attorney. Jody and Morrison never spoke to each other. At least not in the presence of others. Me? I was just biding my time. Our attorneys scheduled a meeting. It was to be the two attorneys, Jody and me. It was the first time I had seen her since I kicked her out. I couldn't help but notice that she had lost a little weight and looked a bit haggard. I was surprised to see Judy there. Jody's attorney asked if that was okay. I looked at her. Are you sure you want to be here? I'm here for Jody. That's not what I asked. No. But I need to be. I told the attorney that I had no objection to her staying. Jody had already seated herself, so the rest of us sat and her attorney started. Mrs. Taylor adamantly denies the alleged adultery and is asking that the petition for divorce be dismissed and that she and her husband work to maintain the marriage. She consents to counseling if that will help. My attorney and I just looked at each other and smiled. My attorney said, if no adultery took place, would Mrs. Taylor care to explain her actions on the evening in question? We all looked at her. I would be happy to. I will start with when my gentleman friend came to pick me up. Does your gentleman friend have a name? Asked my attorney. Of course, but his name is not important. Nothing bad happened, so there is no reason to bring him into this. I left the house and got in his car. We went to the hotel. She went on to repeat, almost word for word, what she had told Judy and, of course, what Judy told me. Champagne, dinner, more champagne, in the room and too drunk to duck, my word not hers, both passed out and slept all night, home the next day, and husband kicked her out. Oh, me. Poor misunderstood me. I made a mistake. I love my husband and want him to forgive me so we can have children and grow old together. I looked at Judy, who was hanging on every word and nodding in agreement. Okay, said my attorney. Let's assume for the moment that what you just said is true and that no sex took place. During the course of the evening, was there any fondling or groping of any type? Any kissing? Hand-holding? Anything that would not pass the husband test? Absolutely not, Jody said with conviction. Judy nodded and smiled. My attorney looked at me and I looked at her. Sitting in front of me was a remote control device. I picked it up and pressed play. The screen dropped out of the ceiling and on the screen was the image of Jody approaching Stan Morrison's car in our driveway. He got out of the car, came around to her side and opened her door. When she reached the car, they kissed. A long, soulful kiss. They got in the car and left. I pressed pause. Line number 1. I said to the room. Everybody was now sitting up just a bit straighter. Jody was pale and Judy just sat there and stared at her sister. On the Thursday that Michael Hamilton first called me and I talked to my investigator, the plan we came up with was to video every move Jody made on Friday evening, starting with Stan Morrison's arrival at our house. We knew from Hamilton's information where the date was to take place, and we knew they had already booked the room. We even knew the room number. What we didn't know was if he could get into the actual room they had booked and video any action which might take place. As it turned out, he could. You also said that no inappropriate touching or fondling took place. Is that also correct? Yes. A bit hesitantly. I pressed play for the second time. We watched as the happy couple followed the waiter to their table in Helton's dining room. Morrison's hand on Jody's bum. We could even see him squeezing it. Line number 2. Jody looked around the room. Her attorney was busily reading the divorce petition, and Judy had suddenly found her fingernails fascinating and was looking at them intently. The video continued. Jody and Morrison ordered a bottle of champagne. They never stopped kissing until it arrived. They hadn't finished their first glass when they jumped up and headed for the elevators. It cost me an even $1,000 for my investigator to get access to their room before they checked in, and 4 minutes after the pair entered it, Jody was on her knees sucking his stick. At this point Jody screamed and ran out of the room, followed by Judy. I pressed pause. It seems like my client didn't accurately recall all of the events of that evening. I will talk with her and get back to you, said her attorney as he gathered his papers, stuffed them in a folder and scurried after the two sisters. My attorney and I chatted for a few minutes, and I headed back to the RV dealership. Shortly before closing, Judy came in and walked slowly over to my cubicle. I just sat there. She stood for some time before asking, "May I sit down?" "Help yourself." Silence. "You knew, didn't you?" "Knew what?" "When I came over to your house that first Saturday, you already knew that they slept together." "Yes. I was watching the video before you came in. And I can promise you they didn't do much sleeping. They ducked Judy. She's my wife and she let another man duck her." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I'm not sure. I guess I was hoping that she would admit it and agree to the divorce. If she had, I would have settled for something other than adultery. That way you and your family wouldn't have had to know what she did. I've always liked your parents." More silence. My cell phone rang. I answered without thinking. "Trey Taylor." "It's Michael Hamilton, Mr. Taylor. I was off yesterday, but I understand that your wife called in and quit. She didn't even come in to clean out her desk. Thought you would like to know." "Thank you. Let me know if you hear anything else." Judy started to speak, but the office loudspeaker interrupted her. "Trey, you have a call on line 6. Trey, call on 6. Trey Taylor." I picked up the phone and talked to a prospective buyer for about 15 minutes. Judy sat there not moving. After I ended the call, Judy and I looked at each other. She's gone, Trey. What do you mean gone? Dead. She loaded a car and left. She's probably just moving into her own place. I don't think so. She told me to tell Mom and Dad that she was sorry she disappointed them. It isn't just your parents she disappointed. Yeah, we know. More silence. Listen, Judy, I have work to do, so if you don't. Oh, sure, yeah, I'm sorry, she said, rising. I better go. She stood, looked at me, then turned and left. That night when I got home, I took my copy of the video the investigator made. My attorney still had the copy we had used earlier. I put it in the player and sat down. I had only watched it completely through once. This would be the second time. When I stopped playing it in the attorney's office, Jody was on her knees with Morrison's stick in her mouth. I fast-forwarded to there and watched as he ducked my wife's face. Then I watched as he ducked her. I couldn't help but notice that his was no bigger than mine, but he took her to heights I never did. She was very vocal in her responses to his constant and almost violent ducking. She screamed when she came. Then she passed out. Not for long, and Morrison didn't seem concerned. He just got off her, lay beside her, stroked her until she came to. Like he had done it 1,000 times. I watched as he ducked her 3 more times. As I watched the video, I tried to figure out exactly what my reaction was. It dawned on me that when Jody and I had sex we were making love, but she and Morrison were ducking. No romance. No love. Just hard raw ducking. He didn't care about her feelings or emotions. He just wanted to duck and come. And it appeared that Jody felt the same. The element of roughness came as a surprise. I couldn't recall any indication that she wanted or would accept anything other than love and tenderness. How could I have missed that? I sat there trying to come to grips with my emotions. Part of me wanted to scream in pain at having my best friend and only love betray me like this. Another part of me wanted to burn the bitch. My mind was like a bowl of spaghetti, all jumbled up with no order or direction. I fell asleep in my recliner thinking about ducking. Not lovemaking. Ducking. And the person I was ducking had no face. Since I first met Jody, whenever I thought of sex, her face was the one my mind's eye saw. 2 more weeks went by. My attorney tried several times to set up another meeting with Jody and her attorney, but couldn't. Jody couldn't be found. A month went by. Then another and another. Still no word from her. I had talked to both Judy and her parents a couple of times during that period. I asked if they had heard from her, and the answer was always no. I thought about getting an investigator to track her down, but my attorney talked me out of it. I had cancelled the credit cards and taken half of the money, but records indicated that she had not touched any of what was left. If she stays gone for a few more months, we might be able to file on the grounds of desertion, but we'll see. My phone rang. Trey Taylor. Good morning, Mr. Taylor. This is Michael Hamilton, remember me? I certainly do. How are things going? Not bad. Thought I might bring you up to date on a couple of things. Do you remember I told you about my divorce? Sure do. Your ex was living in your house with her boyfriend, as I recall. That's right. They were. He laughed. Were? Yep. I'm living there now. With my kids. What happened? It seems the boyfriend is a thief. Somehow he managed to convince my ex that she should steal money from her company, and now they are both in jail. I laughed. Good. Duck them both. Are you still working at the same place? Yeah. That's the other reason I called. Since your wife left, it has been pretty quiet around here, and Stan Morrison has kept pretty much to himself. But for the last week or so, some of his phone calls have been pretty interesting. Interesting how? Well, today he was talking to your wife. How do you know that? I heard him say miss you too, Jody. Did you happen to overhear anything that might give you an indication of where she is? I have a divorce petition she needs to sign. I have the phone number she called from. Would that help? He laughed over the phone. How did you get that? After Morrison finished talking to her, he went back to his desk, put his phone down, sat for a couple of minutes, and went into the boss's office. I went over, picked up his phone and looked at the last call he received and wrote down the number. Piece of cake. Good work, Mr. Hamilton. Thank you. And if you hear anything else, keep me informed. You can bet on it. Then he gave me the number, which I passed on to my attorney. The area code was Southern Florida. I decided to make a phone call. Hello. Hello, Judy. This is Trey. What do you want, Trey? Do you or your family know anyone in Florida? Why? Because I think Jody is there. Why do you care where she is? Because I want a divorce, and in order to expedite it, she has to get the paperwork and sign it. When are you going to ask? Ask what? Where in Florida she's living? I don't have to ask. My attorney is working on finding her even as we speak. Maybe I can save him some trouble. She lives in Fort Lauderdale. Why are you telling me now? Why didn't you tell me before? A long silence. Let me ask you a personal question, Judy. Don't answer if you don't want to. Have you ever been ravaged or ducked rough? Yes. And did you like it? Like it? No. I loved it. Why? She took a deep breath and looked directly in my eyes. Speaking for myself and only for myself, when I have sex, I try to make it as enjoyable for my partner as he is trying to make it enjoyable for me. That means I tend to follow certain conventions in touching, feeling and ducking. But on those occasions when the partner, or environment, or events, or even alcohol, provides sufficient additional stimuli, the sex can be totally out of this world. A slap on the bum, a tug on the hair, or anything else out of the realm of what we call normal, can heighten the sexual experience considerably. Holy spit. She had obviously given this a lot of thought. I looked at her and her eyes were no longer looking at me. She was looking through me and into some memory. Have you ever passed out when you came? No, but I talked to a woman who has, and apparently it is quite an experience. Jody did. What? Jody did. I watched her on the video I have. She was out for a few seconds. Oh my god. Really? I took a sip of my wine and didn't answer. We sat there for a long time, each lost in our own thoughts. Trey. Yes. Could I watch it sometime? The part where she passes out. Could I watch it? The thought of it turns me on so much I'm getting wet just sitting here. I have known this woman for a large part of my life, and I never dreamed I would ever hear anything like that come out of her mouth, or that it would turn me on. That feeling started in my groin, the tingling, and it moved up and spread out. Over 3 months of celibacy was catching up with me. I wasn't interested in making love. I wanted to duck someone. I think that could be arranged. She smiled. I went home a short time later. In bed my thoughts were on ducking, not lovemaking. This time there was a face attached to it, and the face belonged to Judy. She and I talked several times over the next couple of days. She gave me Jody's address and told me that she had talked to Jody and told her the divorce papers were coming. I gave it to my attorney, who almost immediately sent Jody the divorce papers. Judy and I decided that Friday night we would go out to dinner, then go back to my house and watch the video. She was quick to point out that a revenge duck or any other kind of duck was not in the cards, and if that was my plan, I should forget it. She was not going to sleep with her brother-in-law. Period. On Thursday morning, I was at work and received another call from Michael Hamilton. Hello, Mr. Taylor. Thought I would bring you up to date on current events. Stan Morrison just quit. He didn't give a notice. He just walked in, cleaned out his desk, told the boss and left. He told one of the other people in the office that he was moving to Florida. And here our story pauses. As promised, although when have I ever broken a promise, I think you know that I never delay the second parts. But in general, expect the second part tomorrow. And before I go, I just want to say to my commentators, I love you. I laugh at your jokes, empathize with your stories, and really appreciate your support. Thanks to you, my channel was saved from YouTube, and I learned to censor stories. Yes, thanks to you, this channel exists at all. I love you, you are more than just a number to me. Family. See you tomorrow, gentlemen.